Zero on. Woo!
This is episode number 437, Funding the Dream.
It's today!
Community Collective.
Yay.
I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me at Jason Tucker on some stuff. You can also find me over on Mastodon, so feel free to do that as well.
Oh, you did mine too? Oh, my name's Say Reed. I'm at Say Reed Media, not on Twitter. That's Jason Cosper. He's out today. We're sad about it, but he has his own Mastodon instance. You should join it.
And you can find me and all the rest on Apple Podcast, Audible, Google Podcast, and all that stuff. And you can also go and hang out with us on Discord. Links are in the description below. Speaking of links, we got some folks that we linked it up with today. We got Courtney and Katie on the show today. Say you wanna give us a little quick intro on who these folks are?
Emphasis on quick. Okay. Can you tell that if you're listening and not watching, then you can't tell that I'm like jumping out of my seat. I love all our topics lately. They're the best. But this one's near and dear to my heart. We've got two of my very good friends on the show today, and I'm so pleased about it. This is Courtney Robertson.
Hello again.
Who are you and why are you here?
I keep coming back. I'm not sure. So I'm Courtney Robertson. I'm a dev advocate at GoDaddy Pro, and I am a longtime contributor to the WordPress training team.
Mm-hmm. And Katie Adams Farrell to this direction.
Hello.
This way. Please tell me, who are you? Tell me.
Oh, did you say who am I? Who I don't really know.
Yeah,
so my name is Katie Adams Farrell, and I'm actually Say's business partner in Carrot Collaborative. And we do all kinds of nonprofit management and website development. I don't do any of that. Say does all of that, obviously. But my background is nonprofit management, fundraising, finance, marketing, all those good things.
Yeah. Oh, Bob. Hi, Bob. Yeah. So we are here today because in addition to being wonderful people and super experts in their fields, like literally, Katie and Courtney and I have joined forces together to start, not to carry on forever, but just to begin an organization called the WP Community Collective. And this is the secret I've been excitedly tweeting GIFs about for the past few months. And I'm so excited to finally be able to tell everyone about it. There were a few things that needed to come into place before we announced this publicly. One of which was really important to me was to make sure that Matt Mullenweg was aware of what we were doing because I just think that's a good idea. No reason, particularly. But yeah, everyone, I told Matt, okay, so he knows we could now move on. So anyway, the WP Community Collective, Katie, Courtney, and I are the founding board members for this first year. And after that, we have a lot of plans for what we want that to look like afterwards. But we're going to tell you a little bit more about it now. This started out because of the ongoing problem in WordPress that if you're listening to this podcast, you are familiar with, of contribution. I like how that came up right at the same time. So, Courtney, can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you've run into over the course of your contributing career?
Yep. So, as a contributor to WordPress since technically 2009, I've seen different amounts of availability and organization. So to that, I mean, my very first contribution to WordPress was checking guests in for a WordCamp back before the foundation oversaw WordCamps. I'm not sure if the foundation was even a thing yet, actually, when I started. And then I joined a team and started contributing regularly in 2014. And I was juggling that against my own business, building websites for clients. I have contributed while being a bootcamp instructor. I was not able to contribute for a few years in there while I had young children. Financially, I needed to work on some other things with those hours that I had available, those limited
Those
hours.
precious hours.
Yeah, when you've got littles and you've got a 3-hour nap to work in, you
3
choose
hours,
what you
that's
need.
generous. None of my
It
kids
wa-
took 3-hour naps.
Yeah, so
Jeez.
we worked hard to get that scheduled and in place so that I could have time to do some earnings for the family. And so as we navigated through a lot of those things, my availability as a contributor was hit or miss. And I got to a point where I saw the work that was happening on learn.wordpress.org coming before we even launched it. And I felt so passionate about this work that I reached out of my own accord to my now manager and said, if there is ever a possible way that I could be employed by a company to be a contributor, I would absolutely love to do so. But of course, even that became a bit of a challenge because companies don't always think about how their methods of getting contributors involved would look like. What does it mean to hire staff to be contributors? And so I have a couple of coworkers, Mike and George, that are full-time contributors to Core and Gutenberg, and they do fantastic work in those areas. But it's an ongoing thing for contributors to juggle. I have this part of my life and I've got this availability, and they might go together, but I also have to pay for my living. I have to take care of my food. I have to do these things. And so that struggle is very real. And it's one that I felt as a contributor that was not sponsored for 8+ years.
Yeah. My work in WordPress, whatever you may think of it, has never been sponsored. I've been active in the community since 2012. Obviously, never paid for any speaking engagements or organization for WordCamps, obviously. But I've never been sponsored other than I have, my own company. And so I can choose to spend my time on whatever I want, but it's certainly not billable and I'm certainly not getting paid for it. So what I've noticed is that there's so many people in this boat, and it's probably the bulk of the WordPress community, the engaged WordPress community, that people would do so much more if they could, if there was a way for them to just, spend 5 hours a week working on some problem that's been in the, a bug in the track for 8 years, for example, and someone could just, spend that dedicated time. But it's really difficult to do that when you're just allocating 5 hours of your life with no compensation whatsoever. And that's without getting into the complications of, are people getting their contributor badges? And is there even any sort of actual recognition, like in the form of emotional fuzzies that come and make you feel good? Like, so there's that whole thing. But I'm literally talking about just the practical element of trading your time. And because of that, what I've noticed is that the decisions and the more consistent long-term plans are by default of this situation relegated to people who are sponsored contributors. That is just how that happens, because life comes up, you can't make a couple meetings, or something changes, or you get a different job, or you have to go in, and you can't do the same type of consistent volunteering that you were doing before. And that means that the project is being led by sponsored contributors primarily. And I'm not arguing if that is a good thing or a bad thing, but what I do know is it's not a balanced thing. And so that is a big part of the impetus to fund this organization, to find a way for all of us to essentially pool our funds. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but put our stuff together to support ourselves working on our own software. That is this open source software that is powering our businesses and our clients' businesses and our cat blogs and whatever else. I get so starry-eyed about WordPress these days. It's ridiculous. I get let me talk about WordPress some more. So given that, a lot of tech companies right now, I know, Courtney, you've been working really, really diligently on finding ways to bring, to increase corporate contribution in the form of onboarding more contributors or sponsoring people through GitHub sponsors, or finding ways to make it so that people can work on even just the code, but things like the handbooks or the marketing or I don't know, the mobile app or like whatever. So there's all these areas that need that work. And you've been trying to work with different companies to develop that capability. And there has been a concerted effort, a slow maybe, and maybe confusing effort towards 5 for the Future, which is intended, for anyone who doesn't know, to be that anyone who's like, basing their business off of WordPress would donate 5% of their time or their, whatever it is, funds back to WordPress. And it's actually that second part that I think is really important in terms of funds, because time and funds for corporate, especially bigger corporate businesses, they're not the same thing.
Yeah,
so,
even the smaller ones.
Yeah.
I have experience working now for 3 different major brands in the WordPress space. And in the time that I have been with the previous 2, before where I am now, I expressed interest in contributing as part of my role there. And that was not an option for me at that time.
And that was those were at WordPress age, like specifically making WordPress products. That was not like, we're an agency and we kind of make WordPress projects as half of our stuff. That was like literally where you can look on her LinkedIn for where it was.
But we don't need to dig into it. But that said, what's really interesting or good to know is that I've spoken with some of my former coworkers at the last place where I worked, and they're checking out what's happening on Learn. They gave me their hiring matrix and said, turn this into curriculum. You have our blessing, go. So there are ways that they are interested in, considering the work of funding open source. Right. They recognize that it is important.
And it's growing.
They also face some funky challenges. And the same is true for my employer. Like, how do we have, if we've got rules of where we are able to hire from?
Did you say funky, by the way?
I'm sorry?
Did you say funky challenges?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, if they're allowed to hire in certain areas, certain markets, maybe even down to specific states that they are allowed to hire from because of tax laws and all these other weird things, and the person lives in some location that they're not open to hire from at this time, how do you handle that? Or how do you oversee what department is who are these people reporting to that are contributing?
How is their
how do we identify what the goals are for what they should be doing and what are their performance metrics? And I say this recognizing that as a volunteer contributor of 13 years of contributing to WordPress, I recognize that plugin theme shops and hosts are going to be the places that have money, right? They're the ones that are primarily building a lot of things related to WordPress. But also, I recognize that you do not have to get financial backing from those types of institutions to do this kind of work and why it might matter. So always keep that in mind, that I am not saying that only hosts should be financially supporting or that only plugin or theme companies or only big agencies that specialize in the WordPress community should be doing these things. No, but I recognize what the challenges are for those specific niches because that's where I have worked. Yeah. And I recognize that the challenges of where we can hire from, who are people reporting to, what are their performance objectives, how do we know when those objectives are met, when you have shareholders involved and communicating all of that to the shareholders, like, it's
really important.
Open source. Yeah,
it's important.
Yeah, well, I think it's just like, from a broader picture, it's much more expensive and much more complex for a company to hire somebody to do this work that's nebulous, right? And then if that company is setting those objectives, like the whole point in working for a company is to further that company's objectives. So they're going to be along a certain vein, right? That's related to that company's business regardless. And that's fine. Like they need that to thrive, right? Like that's part of it. But just in terms of flexibility to respond to what's happening in the community and the environment right now, like those companies aren't going to have that flexibility because it's not their business.
Right.
right? And it's so much harder to hire at those companies than, you know, an organization that's specifically built for this purpose.
Yeah, like, so just talking specifically about Automattic, Automattic, I think, has a much easier path to hiring contributors because
For
it is
sure.
their core software. So it's the amount of contribution that Automattic does is wildly disproportionate to the rest of the ecosystem. And there are tons of people out there, but you know, without getting into too many politics, I think there is reason for everyone to kind of feel disgruntled about the current situation, because I understand why the folks at Automattic would think that they're doing all the work, and I would understand why the other folks who aren't working at Automattic would think that automaticians are running everything. Even though everyone's like trying not to have it be the case, but it's just literally, again, a matter of time and availability. And the project needs to continue to move on. And if people can only check in once a week, but that's the difference between someone who's working on it as a sponsored person, as a full-time person, versus someone who's able to just join in because they love WordPress, or they, have good ethos about like open source or something. So, one of the ways that that the WP Community Collective hopes to answer this problem is through taking a different tactic in terms of how do we fund those contributors? How do we support them? And instead of having those folks who are coming on need to be an employee of whatever company it is, they can instead contract or be an employee through the WP Community Collective, which can then collect funds both from different companies, different agencies, and the general community, and channel it into a really clear and specific contribution pool, let's say. So, Katie, before we get too far,
contributors don't have to market themselves to try and raise their own funds.
yeah, I mean,
That's
GitHub
the big deal.
sponsorships is happening, and that is a thing. But the idea that everyone's out there like trying to be like, can you put $5 on here and it's a Patreon for code? Like it makes it just so much more work to contribute than just being able to contribute. And that's what we're really hoping to remove, some of the huge barriers and constant barriers to this. So before we get too far into 10 minutes left, but I do want to talk about real quick why this, in addition to the difficulties of hiring people to do contribution, I do want to talk about also sort of the not the charity arm, but the donation arm that many organizations and corporations have. And Katie, can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the incentives for companies to give to a 501c3 incorporated nonprofit organization, and we are incorporated through our fiscal sponsor, which I think Say will talk about a little bit more, but it's called the Open Collective Foundation. So one of the incentives for companies, and we can talk about individuals a little bit more too, is that first, it's going to be a lot less expensive for them to take an amount of money and donate it to a nonprofit organization. There are tax incentives there regardless. Like most larger companies have some sort of philanthropic corporate sponsorship arm, which is like a foundation or, some sort of tax deductible.
Or even marketing dollars.
Yeah, or marketing dollars, right? Which are also deductible in a different kind of way. So it can come from a number of buckets, but it's and of course there are metrics, to Courtney's point, there are metrics and performance objectives that go along with that, but it's much easier to channel that money to an organization whose sole purpose is this than to try to figure out how to add it on top of whatever else they have going on. So like it's a financial incentive and it looks great in the community, right? Because then you're giving to this organization who is much more open and transparent and accountable in terms of who we hire, who the community says we should hire, what the community says really are some of the pain points. Like it's that type of transparency that I think that the WP Community Collective can offer, that something like GitHub sponsors or something like a company doing this work can't. And that transparency is really important to me from a nonprofit perspective, because obviously there are so many nonprofits all over the place that are doing really important work. But because of the way that they are designated by the IRS, there's very little financial transparency or accountability. So you're like, yeah, we hear you that you say you're doing all this work, but like, it's very easy when that story isn't there to just assume that there's something nefarious going on when it's just really opaque, right? So like the WP Community Collective is 1,000% transparent. Like literally every single transaction that happens is public. Every penny that we spend is public and posted on our Open Collective fundraising page. So fundraising is very easy, and you can see exactly where that money's going, like literally every penny. So I think that is a big and important difference in terms of, what we've got, why you would consider the WP Community Collective to be able to do this work in a more efficient and accountable way.
Yeah, I think accountability is a big part of this, because it's not just about, I think it's not that the folks working through GitHub sponsors are not doing the work, but it is that it is difficult for a company to assess that. Like it is difficult to translate whatever work they're doing into to justify the contribution. And part of the structure that we're building into the WPCC is that kind of that feedback loop, where we're also talking about what issues are coming up within the work of the contribution, because a lot of the contributors who are corporately sponsored or just sponsored, let's just say sponsored contributors right now, are they're doing their contributions. The people I know are wonderful people doing great work, but part of their work is reporting back to the company that they are working for. They're giving that information and they're giving it to their company. Again, not in a nefarious way, but it is not being put out there into the community. There are some folks who are doing that. Like, for example, Courtney spends so much of her time every week compiling an intense list of all the stuff that is happening in WordPress, all the different make teams and all of that every week. And she posts that along with post status. So she posts that on posts that on post status site. Wow, it's hard to say. And that work is, I think it's really one of the few things I can point to where I'm saying this sponsored contributor is sharing information with the community in the hopes of encouraging engagement, encouraging contribution, encouraging just knowledge and information. And a big part of the problems that we run into as a community, not excluding the active growth plugin drama of the summer, is communication and a lack of communication. Stuff is happening in the make channels, stuff is happening in private channels, which is fine, but it's not getting out into the community. And there's lots of avenues for that. Obviously, the WP briefing is happening, so I'm not at all saying that information is being withheld. There's just so much information.
And I think the contribution part of it is good because it's outside of GitHub. Like GitHub is like, it's a developer thing. Not WordPress. WordPress as a community is not just developer. I mean, it's very much more other things too. But what I'm just saying is, like, I don't use GitHub, like me myself, like my work. I don't, but I can go onto a website that has a big donate button on it and donate $100 and didn't have to go through the rigmarole of GitHub to actually do it. So I don't know. I think it's a more approachable way of doing it.
A quick pause here. I will note, I did help get from GoDaddy to get an individual sponsor, Joe Dolson, through his GitHub sponsorships page. And that was actually the easiest sponsorship to get through. And he is able to contribute for accessibility, and that doesn't require him to code, although he does review a good bit of code as part of what he does. That doesn't require him to do so. GitHub sponsorships can be one of the avenues Open Collective uses to pay folks out. From what little bit of digging I've been able to do has happened. However, the burden of requiring someone to use GitHub and or connect to Stripe, and some folks do not want to connect to Stripe, and then whatever the international markets are doing globally, that adds exorbitant extra steps, not just have it GitHub, have it connect to their payment gateway, do this, do that. So it can work that way with Open Collective because it's kind of the API of payment gateways, I would almost say. It can work through a lot of those challenges as we're exploring it. But the burden of a contributor having to bring everyone to their own GitHub profile and sponsor page,
Exactly.
that
And
barrier is gone.
So I think this is really important. And this is where the collective, the community collective component comes in, because what we want to do is consolidate these efforts, not say, oh, you shouldn't be doing your own GitHub sponsorship or whatever, but consolidate the efforts so that the administration of this, the promotion of this, the awareness of who's doing it, who's doing what is more centralized, and that we can pool our efforts as smaller agencies or plug-in shops or whatever. We can pool our resources to advance many types of contribution. So not just core contribution, but also handbook editing, for example, or helping, developing Learn curriculum that helps people learn how to contribute. And all of this stuff feeds into a stronger project overall, a stronger community, a stronger code base. I mean, I'm really excited about the idea that we could maybe put together some funds or a little fellowship for like old ticket. So like we call it like old ticket fellowship or something. And it's like, all right, your job is to go handle all tickets that are over 5 years old and talk about them. And let's get these tickets off the table. Not that we're doing that actually. And we have a couple more minutes here. So I do want to lead into what we are starting with. So we're obviously launching publicly today. Here we are. Hi. And we have a few buckets available on our Open Collective page. You can go to the WP Community Collective here, so you can see different options there. But our primary goal right now is our accessibility fellowship. So we are in final talks with one of our a person who is a core contributor right now and is not sponsored and is hoping to get sponsorship so that they can continue their work on the accessibility team and tackling some of those issues that are there and need to be dealt with. And so this is actually not even an open fellowship at the moment that we're asking to find someone. We are actually hoping to just support someone who is already doing this work so that they can take 6 months, for example, and which is what we're going to be raising money for. Take 6 months, 5 hours a week, and know that they're able to do this, so they can take on projects that might have a longer duration. They can make plans for those 6 months. They can put that as part of their schedule and part of their work, and know that they're getting handled, or their payment is coming through, handled all through Open Collective. They don't have to, as Courtney was saying, go market their funds. They don't have to go do a bunch of, scrambling to raise money or to figure it out in the next 3 months. They don't have to worry about even, their own payment gateways. It's just, they get to do their contribution and we help them do that financially. And that is the very first core initiative that we are launching. And we do hope there will be more in the future. So Courtney, Katie, and I are all, as I said, primary parents. I don't know if we said that before, but we are all parents of young children. And our goal is not to run this organization by ourselves. This is not Courtney, Katie, and Faye thing. We are doing this to get it set up. And our plan is to create a larger board, including representation from around the globe for an at-large board. We've started forming an advisory board. Our goal is to offer, whether or not it's accepted, a permanent seat on the advisory board to whomever holds the executive director position of the executive director of WordPress position, whomever that is currently, Josefa. We want to do things, as Katie was talking about, in a very transparent and open way. So this is not something that we're just running with. That's our thing. We very much need the community's help. We very much want the community's help. We're going to be developing this together, putting our bylaws together, putting the boards together. It's only the beginning of that. But the best thing, if you want to help do now, would be to help us fund our accessibility fellowship. And we'll be tweeting out about it and talking about it, of course, more in the next coming months. But we'd really love your help funding that so we could literally get started.
I'm going to give a quick disclaimer as well. My availability to work on this is definitely a project of my own choosing and a passion.
Yeah, this isn't sponsored.
Not sponsored at this time. However, I'm exploring the opportunities of listing Open Collective. When you work for big companies, you'll learn that you have to go through a bigger challenge of who can be a vendor and who can get paid from such an organization. And so I will say that, of course, I'm exploring opportunities for my employer to list Open Collective as a vendor, therefore able to bring funds to this. But there is no guarantee of that at this time. And my time is that I'm doing.
Like Courtney's disclaimer. She's like, I would like to provide a disclaimer.
Yes.
No, so we need the community's help to make this happen. We're not relying on corporate sponsors. We're not taking PAC money or dark money. Just kidding. That was a different commercial. So we need your support. We need your help. We need your input. We want your ideas. Check out the website. You can join for free. The individual membership, just basically sign up, which means you'll get our updates and you'll be able to start having those conversations with us and be part of the greater Open Collective Foundation's membership in general. So let's do this. We are now ready to roll.
Well, that's about it for today. I want to say thank you very much for coming and hanging out with us. I do approve this message, by the way. And
and you have given money.
Thank you.
I have given money as well. So yeah, make sure you do that, and you'll see that that the contribution included the fees and all those things that were kind of tied into it, and it shows you all of that. So yeah, go do that, and we'll be checking in on that later and talk to y'all later. Have a good one. This will not be the last time we talk about this sort of stuff. See you later. Bye-bye. Places. Also, if you want to listen to us and watch us, we're streaming on all sorts of different places.
We're on Mastodon,
YouTube. We're over on tilvids.com. We're everywhere. So talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
We are on the internet.